What's going on, guys? So today we're going to do a starter in this 2012 Outback. This is just the 2.5. It's a premium trim. And I know there's already some videos out there on doing this job, but I just want to share a couple things that I think might be helpful. I'm going to share kind of the symptoms that we were experiencing, and then I'm going to just show you real quick kind of what the procedure is. These are really not that hard. Even if you're slightly new to working on vehicles, this may seem intimidating, but it's really not that bad at all. The other thing that I want to caution you to, I didn't really see anybody else talk about this, but in my personal experience, I have had pretty bad luck cheaping out on starters. Now, I'm not necessarily against like reman units or anything like that, but I have had Subaru starters that, were like parts store brand or like Amazon brand. I've had those fail pretty quick. In the past, 15 or so years that I've been driving Subarus, I've had the absolute best luck with Bosch units. They're a little bit more expensive, but the way that I look at it is I don't really care to risk having a no start issue when I'm way out in the middle of nowhere, or if it's cold outside and I'm just trying to get home. I need my car to start. Now, some of you might have a different opinion. Some of you might have had good luck with parts store starters. That's fine. I don't care. I'm just sharing my experience. So this is the Bosch unit that we're going to use here, and I believe this one's a reman. Like I said, I don't have a problem with that at all, as long as it's done by a reputable company. But let me share with you some of the symptoms that were being experienced with this vehicle that has led me to believe that it needs a new starter. And what I was noticing was this vehicle, it sat for probably 3 months not being started at all, and it needed a new engine. And so what I think happened was the car sat long enough to where the shaft, or whatever you want to call it, that where the starter gear, let me show it to you on this unit here, but my suspicion is that the starter gear probably has built up some corrosion right here. That's what I suspect. And what I believe was happening is that the gear was not able to extend freely all the time. Like, I would hear the starter spinning, but not engaging the flywheel teeth. And it was the worst in cold temperatures. So I'm pretty sure that this starter just needs to be swapped out. But let's take a look. I'm going to show you here kind of what we're looking at. You may have a different situation going on in your engine bay, like if you have a 3.6, or if you have something that's a little bit newer, a little bit older, if you have a turbocharged Outback or Legacy GT, whatever it is, you're gonna probably have an intercooler up here. But what I'm gonna do, I may or may not remove this intake box here. I might just leave it. But what we're going to do is we are going to remove this bolt right here. This bolt goes through the starter and into the bell housing. Let me see if I can get you a better look at it with the camera. Might be tough, but there's a bolt right here. I might have to see if I can brighten up this video so you can see that. We're also going to pull this rubber boot back off of this, and this is a cable that I believe it's the power cable that goes directly to the battery. We're going to unbolt that. It's probably going to be like a 10 or a 12 mil. Then there's a little connector, like a plug on the solenoid. We're going to pull that off, and then on the bottom of here, we are going to get, I want to say it's going to be like a 14 or a 15 mil. We're going to pull that off. I'm probably going to slide underneath the car to get that with some wobble extensions. I love wobble extensions. They work really good. But what I'm going to recommend before you start this job, I like using 6-point sockets on anything that I can. 6-point sockets on most bolts, you're less likely to round them off. And when you're working in tight spaces, like up against a bell housing and a firewall, I just like knowing that I'm going to be able to get a really good, solid connection. If you don't have 6-point and all you got is 12-point, that's fine. Just make sure you're a little bit more careful. I haven't done this job in a while. It's probably been like 7 or 8 years since I've done a starter in one of these cars. But we're going to go ahead and jump in. I will link the starter that I'm using in this. You can use whatever you want, but we're going to go ahead, jump into this. But it's pretty easy. If you're intimidated by it, like I said, don't worry. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead, zip my negative cable off. You're probably just going to need a 10 mil to bump that off real quick. That's a vital step. Make sure you don't skip it. Okay, before we jump into the repair, I thought you might want to hear what this sounds like. So give me a second. I'm going to set the camera down in the engine bay and let you hear it. The starter itself is rotating, but it's not grabbing the engine and really cranking the motor itself. So hope that is helpful if you're curious what that sounds like. Negative battery cable is off. We're good there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this first bell housing bolt out. I'm going to try to do this with one hand. You might be tempted to remove this top bolt that's connected directly to this ground wire or whatever it is. Don't do that. That's just it's connected to a bracket. You don't need to pull that off. So here's this bolt. Let me see if I can get it pulled out and then we'll show it to you. There we go. It's coming out by hand now. There it is. Okay, first bolt's out. Here's what it looks like. So that's the first bell housing bolt. And here's the little bracket with the wire that's attached to it. You can swing that just out of the way to the side. Just make sure you don't lose the bolt. You may want to set it aside just to be safe. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this rubber boot back and see what we're dealing with here. Here's that rubber boot. And then that feels like a 10 mil. So let me grab the 10 mil, we'll zip that out. Okay, it looks like I was wrong, not a 10 mil. I'm gonna guess probably a 12. That bolt that's underneath the rubber boot, it is a 12 mil. Let me show you here. I've got the wrench behind this AC, this soft line for the AC, and in front of the heater hose wire, or hoses that go back into the firewall for the heater. That seems to be the best place. There we go, broke it loose. Now I'm just gonna pull it off by hand. Should be pretty simple. And then while you're in here doing this, it's a good time to check your ground wires, like this little ground wire right here. I'm probably gonna pull that off and clean it off. I'm a big fan of keeping my ground wires clean. Here's that little 12 mil nut that goes onto that. Let me pull this off and show you what it looks like. There's your, I think this is the power wire from the battery to the solenoid, which is what triggers it. And then under that, you're gonna have a little spade connector. I'm gonna pull it off by hand right now. There we go. It should just pull straight back. You see if I can get you, okay, so it just popped off. Let me see if I can get you a visual of what it looks like. I don't know if you can see that, this little spade connector right here. Let me get a flashlight so I can show it to you. It just slides directly on. And that's gonna slide right onto this little spade connector, just to give you an idea of how it goes on. And I'm a huge fan of using dielectric grease on things like this to make it slide real easy and to keep it from just to keep it watertight so no condensation can get on there. But yeah, dielectric grease is one of my favorite things to use on a lot of my electrical connectors, including spade connectors like that. So the only thing left at this point is to get that last bell housing bolt, because at least I think it's should only be one other bell housing. Yeah, Just gonna have one other bell housing bolt. I'm gonna look underneath the car, see if I can get to it from underneath the car pretty easily. You may need to lift the vehicle at this point. Just lift it up with a jack, put it on a jack stand just on one corner just to have some working room. But I may not even need to do that, so let's find out. Just know that the bottom belt housing bolt is going to essentially be diagonal from the top one. You should be able to take a short extension. You don't have to use a wobble extension, but I really like them. And I'm just going to use a short extension on the ratchet. We're going to get that out. Okay, just kidding. We are going to go ahead and lift the Subaru a couple inches, put it on a jack stand, and get it from the bottom. I'm having a hard time with the, getting the socket and the ratchet in there. It's a little bit tight with all of the AC hoses that come around. You may be able to get it on your vehicle from the top with no problem. But just to speed the process up and to stop banging my knuckles up, I am gonna do it this way. So we are gonna get the trusty Harbor Freight jack and lift this thing up just enough to get one of these 6-ton jack stands up under it. That should give us all the room we need. And don't forget, do not use your floor jack as a means of keeping your vehicle lifted. Always use jack stands. Got to make sure that you don't skip that step. Make sure you use your pins, your safety pins. I don't need to in this since it's not even going to be going up anymore. Just kidding, I went ahead and lifted it up a little extra and put the pins in. Okay, we are under the Subaru, and I'm gonna see if I can get some light here so I can show you what we're looking at. It's gonna be above the axle, right there. There's the bolt right there. That's what you need. So if we move our way back, you can see kind of how you're gonna access it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that bell housing bolt out. So I've got a few extensions here. Okay, I've got that bolt pretty much all the way out. What I am actually going to recommend that you do is get underneath and get that bottom bolt out first, because as you can see, the starter has become separated from the bell housing, and I didn't really want the starter to just drop on me. Okay, the bottom bell housing bolt is out and ready to rock and roll. I went ahead and just threaded the top bell housing bolt back in, maybe 3 or 4 threads. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that out, and then the starter is literally just gonna pull right out the top here. All right, so the old starter is out. I was actually mistaken. There's absolutely no corrosion there on that shaft. So I was wrong there. I do believe this is the original starter. This is a Denso unit. So my guess is that this is over 10 years old and is honestly just old and tired. So we're gonna go ahead, throw the new Bosch unit in there. That should solve our problems. To reinstall the new starter is gonna be literally as simple as putting it in place. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the top bell housing bolt installed first, and then go underneath the car and torque down the bottom bell housing bolt, and that should be it. What I'm gonna say real quick though is, if you want the easiest access, just go ahead and remove this. I did have to kind of finagle the starter up out through here. Had to move, like, kind of wiggle some of these AC soft lines out of the way and kind of pull it through. It wasn't too bad, but you may find it advantageous to just pull that air box out of the way. And then I want to share with you another tip about reinstallation. If you forget how this goes into the bell housing, it's gonna need to be in an orientation that's somewhat at this angle. You're gonna kind of want the solenoid here to be kind of facing up. So it's going to go in at an angle that's something like this. And then I also wanted to mention, if you are working on one of these that has a CVT versus the 6-speed manual. When you get underneath the car, it may look a little bit different. You may not have as much room to work underneath the car. And if you have access to an electric ratchet, this can also make zipping out those belt housing bolts a little bit easier. So just something to consider. Okay, so I've got the new starter in place and put the bell housing bolt into the bell house with a couple of threads. Now I'm just going to zip it in with the electric ratchet. You don't need one of these, but this is going to make the process a little bit easier. Here we go. What I'm going to do is actually back that off a couple threads just to make sure that I've got some wiggle room for the bottom one, and then I'll snug everything up. Now, when you put the new starter in, as long as you get it kind of in that general correct orientation, like the right angle, you'll kind of feel it kind of go in naturally the way that it's supposed to. But there you go, you can kind of see how it's supposed to look. So now I'm going to get under the car and we're going to zip this bad boy into the bottom. All right, your torque spec for the bell housing starter bolts on this vehicle are about 30 foot-pounds, which is really not a lot. Got the bottom one in, now I'm gonna get the top. All right, this is the dielectric grease that I use. You can use whatever you want. This is just Permatex. I've had it for probably 10 years. I'm gonna just put a little dab of it on the spade connector, and then it should be good to go. Okay, I put the little spade connector in place. What I would recommend to you, make sure that you kind of orient yourself as to how these starters look. So like once you pull the old one out, you can kind of look at it just so that you kind of have an understanding of where everything is, because chances are a lot of this is going to be done sort of by feeling. That'll make it a little bit easier for you. So the only thing left to do is put this power wire on, and your new starter will probably come with, great, your new starter is probably going to come with a brand new nut for the solenoid power stud. If it does, that's great. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, you can just make sure that you save the old one and reuse it. So check that when you pull the new starter out of the box. Okay, another quick note. When you put that new bolt on or new nut on for the power cable onto the solenoid, you may want to just double check the size of that nut before you put the starter in. Just check it right out of the box. It was a different size on the old one versus the new one. In this situation, it turned out to be actually a 14 millimeter. So just be cautious of that. We are gonna make sure that this is all good to go. When you tighten down that power cable, you don't really need to reef on it too hard. You just want to make sure it's snug. The other thing I'm going to recommend that you consider is if you have a battery tender, make sure the battery's topped off, because if you've been having hard start issues, you may have drained the battery substantially doing a bunch of starting procedures. So got this all charged up. It was a little bit low, but whipped out the old NOCO, got it all topped off. I don't know, it's flashing in the video, but it doesn't actually look like that in real life. It's solid. That's just the frame rate on the camera. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and start this thing up and make sure it's good to go. Moment of truth. We're gonna jump in the car, see how she starts. Make sure I didn't mess anything up. Let's give this a shot. Boom, there it is. Problem solved. Now, one more thing that's going to be helpful for you guys to remember. In Subarus, when you disconnect the battery, the ECU is probably going to want to be put through an idle relearn process. There's a bunch of videos on how to do it. I think Mr. Subaru, I can't remember what his full channel name is, but you'll find him if you search for this. He's got a real detailed explanation of how to do the idle relearn process. It'll make sure that the car idles correctly and drives better. So if you start the car and it acts real funny, that's why. The first time that you start it though, before you're able to go through the relearn process, put the key in, put it into the on position, and wait 5 seconds before you start it. Otherwise, the car's probably just gonna stall out and die. So just be aware of that. But that's all there is to it. Like I said, I hadn't done this in probably 7 years. So it took me a little bit longer than it should have, but This is not something you need to be intimidated by. Just make sure you take your time. It's pretty simple. I hope that I added a little bit of value with some of the just little details that I felt like some of the other videos didn't cover. Yeah, she's good to go. And now we're gonna box that core up and send it out to the place that we bought this Bosch starter from. That's another thing. Don't throw away your old starter, because chances are when you bought your new starter, you probably paid a core charge. You can absolutely get a refund on that if you send your old starter into them. That's something you're going to want to remember. Make sure you get your core charge back. That's how core charges work. They're like a deposit, because when they reman these, they need old units. They need a good like pipeline of them so they can continue to refurbish them and have a good flow of parts for new customers. So that's that. If you got any questions, put them in the comments. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and until next time, I'll see you out on the trails.